Well, welcome everybody. It's that time of the year. We're getting around to the CARB Hall of Fame inductions. And I am here with Rick Darling, and he is one of the inductees this year. Rick, it's got to be a good feeling, man, to have that opportunity to get into the Hall of Fame, to know that there are some of your peers out there that think, man, you know, Rick's been around this for a while, done a good job, helped a lot of people, and you need to get into the Hall.
It feels good to be recognized for something. You know, it's just nice.
Just nice. I know what you mean.
Hard to explain.
Yeah, you and I are about the same age, and I know I put a lot into the job and, you know, things that I did, and you put a lot into racing, and to have some recognition for that is pretty neat, I think, and it's really nice of CARB to be able to do that, I think, and you're in this class of 2012.
Yeah, no words. It's just nice to be recognized and everything for it.
Yeah.
I can't.
I know what you mean. I understand perfectly. 55 is when your dad starts taking you to the races.
Yep.
Tell me some of the tracks you guys went to.
Started out Thunderbolt between Seday and Green Ridge, and Lakeside, the original Lakeside. Saw more motorcycle races there than cars, because Dad was kind of into motorcycles. But
was he a Harley guy? Excuse me for interrupting, but was he a Harley guy?
Yes, I've got one now too.
Okay.
But that and Sportsman Speedway, also Warrensburg. We spent a lot of time at Warrensburg track out on 50 Highway by the airport. Clinton. I mean, there's several tracks that we went to.
I was going to say, when you told me Warrensburg on the phone the other day, I thought, now that surely can't be the same Warrensburg that we've all been going to for a number of years. It had to be a different one.
Yeah, I think on the east side of the airport's where it was located at. And just like all tracks back then, they were full all the time.
Yeah.
Because nobody had internet back then, so they needed entertainment, and racing was it. So.
Okay, 61, 62, your dad's involved with I guess you could say more or less a 3-team deal with some other guys, Jay Lyle being one of them, and they went around in racing, so I'm sure, boy, you were right there with them.
Yes, there was times that, a lot of cars back then had clutches in them, and, well, I was 13, 14 years old, and I was changing clutches and stuff while they were working.
Oh, really?
Guys used to come in Dad's garage, and Dad would say, well, we're going to race tonight, but we got to change the clutch in it. And people would say, well, when are you going to get started on it? It's in the afternoon, And he said, well, it's being worked on right now. And they'd walk over to the car, and there I am down there on the ground, pulling the he had to pull the rear end out and then the transmission. And they couldn't believe that I was doing all the work on the cars. So.
Kind of helping out around the garage. You ever get to take one out for just, packing the track or anything like that?
Yes. The one I took out was the last car Dad owned, him and Jay Lyle, partners, and that was the offset Roadster. And Sportsman Speedway, ironing the track, and Russell Hibbert, he was in the D7 car, the old Indy car that was cut down. And he pulls up beside me, and I was always small and looked young for the age. And anyways, he pulls up beside me and looks at me, and he smiles real big, pulls on ahead of me, pulls in front of me, and stands on it, just peppering me and everything. But that was my first time on the track. Was with that Roadster. So.
That has to be a thrill. I've never been in a race car, but man, having all that power and everything right there at your touch.
Power to weight ratio, it puts you back whenever you're not spinning too much.
Right.
Like early in the night when it's like ironing the track, you can spin the tires real easy. But when it gets dried out a little bit and it's tacky, it puts you back in the seat pretty good.
Okay, 1965, you're graduating from high school, and your dad turns the race car over to you.
Yeah, he said that he knew I was going to do it. And he wanted a car that he knew, was safe, which, looking back, it wasn't the safest. It should have been.
I was going to say, we look back at those things, and Of course, I guess the image that always comes to my mind is the guys with either the leather helmets or the half helmet with the leather.
Well, my go-kart helmet was the half helmet with the leather on the sides. But then when I started racing, I had an open face.
Mm-hmm.
And I've still got 3 of the helmets that I used to wear, the go-kart, and then an open and a full-faced one. But, we took the car, and, Dad didn't have an engine in it, and we had a Hudson that was in Jay Lyle's last car, not the offset, but the last B car, you could say, that he ran. And we put that motor in it, and that's how I started out. And the cars back then, not after I got into the Sprinters, you could feel the car on the track, but that first car, I mean, it seemed like it was right up on top of the track. Didn't get anything, and then of course I had a bad night. The steering broke on it.
Yeah.
And I was out for a couple of weeks waiting for Jay, because I wasn't a fabricator or anything, waiting for Jay Lyle to, do some welding on it and stuff. But that wreck was at Thunderbolt, and I tore down a bunch of fence that night.
You mentioned go-karts. I think we should touch on the go-kart racing just a little bit. How long did you race go-karts before you actually got started in the big cars?
3 years. 1 year was kind of playing. Then we kind of got on the serious side for about 2 years, and then go-karts faded away real fast. But I don't know how many races I won and stuff with that. The first year was trophies. Then the parents complained about the cost, so they dropped the trophies and started paying
money back. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last year, actually, they were paying us to come to a track. Some local was doing all the winning. They pay us to come in and outrun them.
Yeah.
And
bring the hot dog in.
Yeah, and the thing is, my go-kart back then, the last one that we went out with, of course, single engine. It was a junior because of my age. With a gallon of fuel, which is a full fuel tank. It only weighed 80 pounds.
Oh, really?
And there's a place for my heels of shoes, and for me to set. In between was open.
Oh my gosh!
Trying to cut the weight down on it. And there was only 3 of them ever made that was that light.
Yeah. You never did catch a foot or anything and bend it back?
No. Only I've been running to the fence a few times. Hay bales, but had one car at Clinton. They shut down the old racetrack, and they had a go-kart track there. And there was a little banging right at the start of a race. Somebody just about stalled or something. And I had a cart go over top of me and leave black marks on the helmet. And they're still on the helmet today on the display. But
yeah, still there. Okay, we move on just a little bit, and boy, Uncle Sam comes calling, and old Ricky Darling is going in the Arby.
Yeah, at end of 65, of course, had to park everything. I was working at McDonnell Aircraft. Got a good job. Maybe I could make some money to race on.
Yeah.
And I had a guy, Clyde Lyons, out of Windsor, that was going to take the car, the T-bucket, and they'd switched over to 2-barrel carburetors on overhead valve engines. He was going to take care of everything. All I had to do is show up at the track.
Yeah.
And Uncle Sam said he needed me more than I needed to race, I guess.
Now, was this right? I'm trying to remember.
Start of '66 is when I was drafted.
So that was really toward the end of Vietnam?
No, it just
a couple years.
Just after the start, really. I mean, it'd been going maybe 8-10 years, something like that, or less. But Vietnam went up to 73, and actually people were there after that. Even though we were supposed to be out, but we still had people in there.
Yeah.
But I was in the infantry, and I don't know, lived outside quite a bit.
Yeah. Saw some action over there.
No, I didn't go to Vietnam. We were going. They had a plane loaded of us. We had the books on the language, and then they turned us because over in Europe there was problems on the border.
Okay.
And that, of course, upset us a lot. And we went over there and spent a lot of time on the border. I mean, sleeping outside in the snow and everything. Sometimes we'd have a tent, sometimes we wouldn't. And then there's rotation stuff. We'd be in barracks at times and all, but you know, survived that, got back, and didn't have to go over there, and went back to racing in '68.
Okay. When you get back in '68, though, things are changing quite a bit. I mean, like you were saying, the overhead valve motors, V8s, had just come into racing.
Yeah.
And of course, to me, the face of racing hasn't been the same since. But before that, like you were talking about, the 308 cubic inch Hudson motor and the T-bucket, and then you come back and you decide to get into it modified.
Yeah, that was the modified, but it was a B. Yeah, the newer modifieds were smaller and supposedly lighter and all. But I bought a car and repainted it and everything. I'd always done my own painting. I always got, well, the Sprinter had Wayne Rucker lettered it, but the modifieds, well, the T-bucket or the one I got after I got out of the service, I did my own numbers and stuff on it.
No, about this time, where were you racing, Rick? When you did get back, where did you start racing at then?
It was at Marshall at Sportsman Speedway. That was that in Jeff City, California. That was the main tracks I just ran that thing on, because I was still, trying to get back into it and get the feel back.
I was going to say, that had to be quite a bit more horsepower, didn't it? Coming from them.
And that car was more hooked to the track than that T-bucket was, so everything had changed a bunch while I was gone. But
amazing what 2 years will do, isn't it?
Big from street tires that was about 5 inches wide, maybe 6 at the most, to slicks, the grooves. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
But always, except for the 308, I always ran 327s.
Yeah.
And
well, they were the standard for Chevrolet there for a while, and racing, weren't they? I mean, high RPM and
and none of mine. I only had one that was ever balanced. I ran them, just basically pull them out of a car and Z28 cams, what I end up running all the time, and whether right at first the carburetors, and then went to fuel injection. I still ran the same engine, just made that intake change, and a lot of people thought I had big motors and stuff like that. I did my own head work back then too. So
what kind of horsepower did that motor develop? I mean, I know today we're talking like what, 700, 750 out of a lot of these that are running on dirt tracks around here.
That thing, maybe around 4.
Around 4?
Yeah, that'd be. I wouldn't say it was any more than that, but never did dyno any of them.
Yeah, still a kick in the pants, though, wasn't it? Okay, in 1970 and 71, you get together a couple $1,000s and you decide to maybe go sprint car racing, and you go to, and I've got to look at the name and I can't remember, a little town in Missouri, let's just say.
Yeah.
And you pick up a sprint car and a modified and 2 trailers for $2,000.
Yeah, and of course the modified had been sitting outside. It didn't have any drive line to it, no hubs, but it had the spindles on the front end. The Sprinter was in a barn, and it was real dirty, dusty. It needed a motor in it, and it came with a fuel injection that he told me it was off of Greg Wells' USAC offset.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I had to buy different nozzles because it had nozzles in it for nitro.
Oh,
and
boy.
of course we weren't supposed to run it, even though some guys did. So I had to get different nozzles for that, and ran that thing 4 years before I ended up selling it. And Eddie Levitt came up one night, and he looked at it and he said, "This thing looks familiar." And he walks up, puts his hand on the roll cage, and he said, "Yep, this is the car." And he said, "This thing do anything funny with you?" I said, "Well, one night in hot laps I spun it and the front end lifted and I went in for end in it." And he said, "Well, at Olympic he went in number 1 turn and it jumped up in the air and turned to the right, the front end did, and came down on the left hand side and went up to the wall and slid along the wall, and that's where that flat spot came from." But we talked, and I'd won more races, heats and stuff in it than he did.
I'll be darned.
So, but we had a nice talk that night at the track. So and that was down at Jeff City.
Yeah.
But,
Rick, answer me this. Now, you started out with the Hudson and the T-Bucket, which is, you say, kind of a modified, and then you move into another modified. But was sprint car racing your destination? Is that where you wanted to be when, I mean,
yes.
I guess as your career went on,
Yes.
an open wheel guy?
That actually, to tell you the truth, way back, even the go-kart days, I wanted to road race.
Oh, really?
But the money, and the
Yeah.
location we were at,
Yeah.
Dad never had any money, and I never did race and have any money, but that was where I wanted to go. But I really wanted to be in a midget and never to get a shot at it.
Never did run one.
No. That was. I wanted to be there more than a sprinter. I wanted to be in a sprinter, but midget's what I really wanted to be in.
Yeah.
I had a few chances, but somebody would talk them into letting somebody else in it.
Dude.
And they'd tell me after the races they wish they had me in it.
Uh-huh.
Whether I would have done any good or not.
Yeah.
But their idea, they should have went with me instead of the other person.
Did you ever make it up to Knoxville and try that out, or?
I was up there once in a Don Brown modified, and warming it up, shock mount broke, and there was no welder there. They couldn't find anybody in town that would open up to weld it back on, and that was my only time up there. They wanted me to take my car up, and I said, I'm running a stock engine that's not balanced. I'm not going to take it up there and run that. And then with the used tires and the recap tire like I ran, I didn't have any business.
No business to be in there. Okay. In '74, you kind of are helping out Bill Utz, and you're also using part of his shop to work out do your own racing business when you could. There again, you're kind of on a budget, but you're also working on motors on the side.
Well, I started the engine business, assembling them and doing the head porting after Bill, but I helped Bill for 4 years. '74, he gave me half his shop because we lived in a house trailer down from the fairgrounds. He went by one day and honked, and he watched me put the Sprinter together on a dirt floor garage in Marshall.
Yeah.
And no heat or anything, one 500-watt light bulb. But he'd stop in and sit on the tire and visit with me whenever he was in town. So he saw me working on the car outside, and he came back and asked what I was doing. I said, well, trying to get it ready for the weekend. He says, you don't work on race cars outside. He says, give me 2 days to clean the shop up. And 2 days later, he came back and gave me half the shop, and I worked on mine there and helped him with his. And then I sold out that year, and he said, well, nothing to drive, you just help me all the time. So 4 years, travel around IMCA stuff and all like that. So
I take it your running and your racing in this time frame was kind of hit and miss, and kind of whatever the budget would allow.
At that time, I'd run maybe one night, 1 week, and maybe 2 the next. But if I wasn't racing, I was helping him. And I came in. Well, I told you about the end for end. Well, came to the shop one night, and I didn't have a key, so I'm waiting for him to come there. And he had some kind of mean German shepherds in a way. But I waited for him to show up, unlock the door, and went in there. But as we were getting ready to go in, he said, what do you think? The door hadn't even opened yet. And I said, think about what? And he opened the door, and he had built new bumpers for my front end of the car. And I said, I can't pay for this. He said, don't worry about it. I didn't like what yours, because they were bent up a little bit. And he said, what do you think about the other end? We're still at the front end of the car. So I walk around, and he had an old Champ dirt car bumper out behind the shop, and he cut it down and put it on there. And, really made a difference in the car with the chrome bumper back there. That was straight and everything. But he said, don't worry about it. He just didn't like what was on the car. And, that, I guess, he understood, he knew how I was operating, the money and everything like that. And in '74, I had my first new tire, and he'd given me one because he didn't have a used one to sell me. So he gave me a new one, and that made a big difference in it. And I didn't have the money for that also, so he said, pay me whenever you get the money.
Mhm.
But went to the track that first weekend, and new tire makes a big difference on a car.
Does it ever? I think what we're talking about here is a little bit ironic because Bill Utz is going to be going into the Hall this year too. So, how fitting. Maybe you two guys going in together. Sounds pretty neat.
It I can't come up with the words.
Yeah.
That, and then of course Jay Lyle,
Mm.
who used to drive for Dad.
Yeah, right.
And stuff. And Jay's helped me out all. For a lot of years, he's always brought me hits to work on and stuff. So,
Keeping you in business.
yeah, for him and the boys. So
Yeah.
it's nice.
Yeah. In 80-81, your last driving gig, and it's for two guys out of St. Louis, Paul Tobias
Yes.
and George Egan, and driving a sprint car for them. How did that go?
Well, we'll go to the second one, Egan. Basically, that was a high-dollar deal, but it never would. The first time in it was over in Illinois, and they pushed me off at Granite City. Came around the quarter mile that was on the inside.
Mhm.
Went out on the half mile, and going into number one turn, I coasted into the grass because the whole drive line fell out between my legs.
Oh, my.
And the last time I drove for him, my last race was at I-70, and they didn't put enough fuel in the car. It was an outlaw, World of Outlaw race. And I hadn't gotten, I'll make the story short, I got there late. It wasn't my choice, but anyways, I got there late, and I didn't, he found somebody else to drive it the first day. Well, I was there the second day, and I went by myself, so I didn't have to worry about being late. And his driver didn't show up that had drove the day before, so I got the car qualified for the feature on the second day, and they didn't put enough fuel in it for the feature.
Oh, my.
And I think Steve let me. I was nursing the car, but I didn't really know what was wrong with it. It'd run, but it wouldn't run. And Steve had lapped me 3 times before I got off the track.
Okay. Through the 80s and the 90s, you're helping Bill Utz again and still doing some motor work out of your shop. And there are actually some pretty big names in racing come calling. I guess Rick Darling has learned how to do porting pretty well because some of the big boys are calling.
I started the porting in the late 70s when I was with Corbin, and doing assembly work. And then, by 85 is when Earl Garrity sent me work. Don't have all the dates and stuff like that, but used to go to the outlaw races and sit on on Steve Kinser's trailer, and his right-hand man. We'd talk about, the Dash 12 head had come out, and everybody's complaining about him being lazy. So I told him I had 3 dividers to put in the head, which you don't need stuff now because cam and everything's come about. 3 dividers, depends on RPM range and the tracks you run on. And they end up putting a spider web deal in for them. And it only worked at 3 tracks, they said, but and they were using Garrity engines, so between the two, things were coming about there. Then, of course, Kenny Weld started up Weld Tech, and he had done a head, and he showed it to me, and I told him it wouldn't work, and he asked why, and the head was made, if anybody has one, that'd be a good collection piece for a museum or
paperweight.
But it was like teardrops all through the port, and I told him, I said, the engine's not a running engine won't work with it. And he said, it looks good on a flow bench. And I said, but that's dry. That's just air going through it. There's no fuel mixed into it. Of course, nowadays they do the wet flow on everything. My bench isn't set up for wet flow. But anyways, I think it was 2 weeks later. He says, design stuff for me. Because that engine did what I said it'd run rich lean, the exhaust stuff on it. But anyways, that and head porters want me to close up and come to work for them. I just had a lot of stuff going on. Now, Bob Baker got me hooked up with ASCS when they started up. They were trying to figure out a head to restrict things.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was in on that deal. Of course, they didn't use my ideas, but
At least they ask your advice.
well, my opinion, they may
Yeah.
have asked for a lot more.
Yeah.
But anyways, that also makes you feel good when
I was going to say, man.
Emmett and Brodeck's calling about wanting to know my opinion.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, engine builders. I even had one that wanted me to come and work for him, do assembly work, but no porting or anything because the CNC stuff.
Yeah.
And he felt that where he was getting his heads, he was working with them, I guess, good price and everything. But he wanted me to inspect his people's work and put the motors together. Didn't do that. And of course, we'll back up to '79. Well, we were winning races at I-70 with Corbin and Pat Patrick. That's job offer came from him.
Yeah.
Wanted me to work in the engine shop there. But the last person that wanted me to go to work for him was the winner of '02-03, Steve Smith out of Indianapolis, Pro Stock drag racer. He wanted me to come and take care of the cylinder heads for him.
Yeah.
And he said he's got a CNC machine. I told him, Steve, I'm an old-fashioned hand porter. And he said, well, I'll teach you how to take this solid block of aluminum, put it in the machine, the buttons to push for the machine to do it, but I'll pay you $60,000 a year to get that last 5 or 10 CFM out of them. And no, I didn't go that route. Plus, Uncle Sam got me again in end of '03.
Yeah.
I was gone for almost 2 years for that deal. But I have people call, and I've helped an awful lot of people that are competitors of mine now.
Yeah.
Both porting and engines. Well, the porters aren't really out there. They found out it takes quite a bit of time and money to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
But just so much, has happened over the years, and a lot of it I didn't, if you want to say, jump on and take it that way. I just wanted family, even the racing. Family was always first, and stayed around here, helping the budget racers. Earl Garrity told me, he gave me 5 things to do, and I didn't do any of them. And one of them was to get away from the budget racer. And I said, well, I was a budget racer, and if I can help them, like that, but you help them to a point, and then they'll go to somebody else and spend money that they told you didn't have to give to you if they had it for somebody else. But I've helped a lot of racers, and most of them that have won championships, people think they were high-dollar engines. None of them were.
Yeah.
They were cheap, thrown together engines, but I, tweaked the heads a little bit, and if they had a cam, I'd check it over, and if it had a spec card with it, I'd see if it worked with my heads. And my heads are, if you really want to do a high-dollar deal, I mean, you build them for either gas or alcohol. And I've got formulas and stuff that I've accumulated and worked with over the years to tell me the minimum that I can make a port for, and then you go from there on the RPM they're turning and lift and all like that. And most of them that can port heads now are doing it, or the ones wanting to do it themselves, just to clean up. Because there's areas you can knock 10,000s off and it'll kill the head. It'll still work, but it won't work at the high level.
High level. Yeah. Now let me interrupt you right here for just a minute. Now you did all this now with no technical school, no formal training.
No.
This is all just learn as you go.
I've had people, like I said, want me to teach them. And I said, go buy a flow bench and 100 or more valves and put different angles on the valves. And then start from there.
100 or so different angles.
And because some valves you can just put 2 on, and some I've had valves that I could put 7 angles on the valve.
Oh, really?
To contour it myself without a lathe or CNC machine.
Holy smokes!
But I've a lot of times carrying 11 and 12 at night sometimes I think at 1 o'clock in the morning she'd come out. This is when the shop was at the house. Asked if I was going to bed. And I'd be out there 8:30, 9 in the morning, and I'd stay till late at night.
I understand the feeling. Talking just a little bit too about some of the drivers that you've helped. Dave Meyer, modified champion at CMS. John Benning, two-time ULMA, or I'm not sure, two-time ULMA, two-time late model champion at CMS.
Yes.
Tom Charles, modified champion at Lakeside. And I'm sure that there's probably other names that you can add to that.
Well,
but like I say,
there's a lot of them, and you know, and there's people that don't want anybody to know.
Oh yes, oh yeah.
But like on Dave, that's one that everybody thought was high dollar because of all the championships and wins, and he even went through a phase we were using cast iron, stock GM cast iron cranks in the modified.
Oh really?
And he'd go to sales and buy stuff like that, but him, just like Tom Charles, it's not what's under the hood. You know, the driver gets in it, it's a package deal. And Dave and Tom could really work with, you know, the chassis and stuff. Tom, what work I did for him was an IMCA type engine, flat tappet. It was his backup. Whenever his roller cam engine messed up, he'd use that thing. And I was there at Lakeside the first time he ran it, and he started tail end of the B, finished second. Tail end of the A, finished third, went across the start-finish line next to the second place car, just maybe front bumpers were maybe 3 foot difference, something like that. And that other car had an engine that was over $25,000, they told me. And here this cheap flat tappet deal. It's
did the job.
But it's you want a reliable engine under the hood, but there's more, especially nowadays, tires and the shocks. They'd spent, instead of buying them $40,000 engines, if they'd let, whether it's me or some of the locals, build an engine that is good and spend the rest of the money that they would have spent on them high dollar ones and spend it on shocks and tires, they'd save a lot of money and have a lot more fun.
Have a lot more fun, maybe one or a few more races. Rick, 46 years in racing, and team member, motor builder, driver. If there's one thought that you can come up with or take away from racing, I mean, I know you're not out of it yet, but
No.
but what is it, if you could relay it to just people about racing?
Well, we heard it last night. Operate within your budget. Don't take food off the table, because we never did do it and had fun to, you know. We wish at times I would have, you know, for a tire. After I found out what a new tire felt
Would
like.
you?
But just try to have fun at it, and you know, you can't be mad once something happens. Basically, let it go and worry about the next race. Whether you made a mistake or somebody else made a mistake, and you got involved in it, it's over with. Just, you know, go on to the next race and have fun. Visit with more people than what I was always quiet till last few years, but you know, visit with people, get to know them, become friends with them, and just have fun.
I think that's one of the things for me that the time that I've had the great opportunity to be in it and be around racers and people that are in racing is you're going to run into all different kind of folks, all different kind. And I think, like you told me when we were talking on the phone, you've been to several states, you've made just tons of friends with people in racing, and had the opportunity to be in it the way you have.
I've worked on cars in Florida. I worked on them in Washington State, New York, just everywhere. And I've, like a lot of us did back then, 2 races on the same day as a driver, but I've also made 2 races on the same day mechanicking, and they've flown me like over to Illinois to work on a car, fly me back so I could work on a car at I-70 at night.
Oh wow.
So done about everything, drag racing, mud trucks, you know, just whatever, helping help people more than I should.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that come in and they don't have the money, and I, instead of running them off, I say, okay, we'll use these parts or something within your budget. And I should have made them go someplace else or get the money. They'd been more satisfied, I think, if I'd just put my foot down.
Yeah.
But that's not me. I always help people.
Well, once again, Rick, I want to congratulate you on being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I think if anybody actually sits down and listens to this, they can see why, you are going to be inducted into the Hall, because you have been an intricate part of racing, and congratulations is all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have anything to say.
Okay.